Let's kind of start with a little inclusion. And, if you can just, I'll give you a minute to take a look at these pictures. And I know they're very heavy, pictures. Apologize for that. However, again, this is the world that we need to prepare our students for, right? A wonderful world, but it's a world that also has many problems that we need to deal with, and they will need to deal with. So take a look at these pictures. And then when you're ready, go ahead and in the chat, um, place A, B, C, D, or E, whichever one kind of really resonates with you, something that really kind of, just that calls out to you. You are more than welcome to put multiple, and you're also more than welcome to write the word all. Okay. So give yourself some time to kind of just take a look at these pictures and think about what kind of thoughts come up as well. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. C and D, all. Yeah. And every one of these is something that we're dealing with right now in our world, right? Just turn on the news and watch one evening's news, and you'll probably notice something about all of these. So yeah, again, it's heavy, but I'm hoping that today's PD will not be a source of anxiety. But again, and for our students, the goal is not to just dump all this information, all the negative news on them and create, echo anxiety. Our goal is to really, truly empower our students. And I've seen students who went from, feeling nervous and sad about these things when they learned about it to feeling truly empowered and just, they've got the attitude of let me at it. I can solve these problems, right? They can contribute to these solutions. So thank you for sharing all of that. We are gonna go back to these pictures in just a little bit though. So for our agenda for today is the following. We have we're going to cover the LAUSD climate literacy approach. The board resolution calls for climate literacy to be integrated into all subject areas and all grade levels. We've actually expanded that from UTK to 12. We even have now climate literacy champions, which I'll talk to you about later, in our early education centers, as well as our adult schools. And so then how do you then integrate climate literacy into all these subject areas, right? So we'll be talking about that approach. Real world problems, like as we saw in the inclusion, again, the world that we're getting our students ready for, it's got a lot of amazing wonders and everything, but we also need to make sure our students are prepared for the problems that are out there as well. And then finally, as in the subtitle, rigor. What we'll find out is that when we give students and we present students with real world problems that don't have an answer key or a teacher's guide, right? There's no teacher's guide or answer key to climate change. So then when it's so open-ended in that way, it's amazing to see the level of rigor goes up tremendously. And we'll talk about that today. I am going to continue to put in the chat. I'm hearing more people coming in. You'll see a bunch of links in there. The sign in is one of them. Okay, so make sure you sign in and then take a look at some of the other links that are available there too. All right, so the approach that we're taking in LAUSD, it's a real world problem-based transdisciplinary learning approach. It's a mouthful, but real world, because we want the learning that's happening in the classrooms to be relevant and connected to the students' passions and concerns. I still remember as a first-year teacher, constantly being asked, when something difficult comes up, Mr. Song, why do we need to learn this, right? And hopefully we can answer that question today or deal with that question today. Problem-based. You may have heard of project-based. Okay, we're kind of starting with a problem because what we found is that when you start with a problem, it's much more open-ended, and it's much more relevant, and it opens up the kind of the options and the tasks that we can give our students to be a much wider variety that really even utilizes our own students' culture and their background and their strengths and their concerns and passions, as tools, to again contribute to the greater solution of these real world problems. Transdisciplinary. That one was new to me when I first started this role, especially in STEAM. Transdisciplinary, you may have heard of disciplinary and interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. We'll talk about all that. But transdisciplinary is when we flip it, and the focus is not the subject, but the focus is a real world context that we apply classroom learning in different subject matters, on all kinds of things to that, again, as tools for our students. And when that happens, again, I promise you will never hear your students say, why do I need to learn this? And finally, learning. To me, that's the most important part. We want to shift the verb that's happening in the classroom from teaching to learning. I always thought, when I first started teaching, my goal was to transfer as much of my knowledge and skills to my students as possible. And the more I transferred to them, the better the teacher I was, right? And I'm learning how. And yeah, first of all, it's not the most productive way of doing it. In a better way is when we really just give students these amazing opportunities to be able to explore our world and to, again, contribute to the solutions to the problems in our world. And when we do that, our students, engagement isn't an issue. They become excited. I've seen students who gave the teacher the most grief at the beginning of the year, towards the end of the year, become the most dedicated and most passionate student in trying to solve these problems. So we're going to watch a little video. The sound should be on, but again, if we can't hear it, please feel free to unmute yourself and let me know. And this is going to be covering the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which was also something that was new to me. But what's wonderful is you'll see in these 17 goals, you'll quickly hear like a little overview of every single one of them. And as you hear them, you'll see that these problems cover the vast majority of the problems that our students will face or they're seeing in the world, right? And the UN goals, we've had UN goals for a very, very long time. But interestingly, they've been mostly focused on developing nations and for them to be able to develop in a sustainable manner. However, this new set of goals, and there's new goals every 15 years. And I've even talked to people who kind of have the UN's ear a little bit on this, that please make sure that we don't lose the work that's been done with these 17 goals when we revise them, just make them better. And so, again, what's also great about these goals is, and what's different about these goals from the past is that instead of just focusing on the sustainable developing nations, we are now giving this goal to everybody. All of us can participate and contribute to these goals as a world, as a planet. And what's also wonderful is that, at the beginning, it was just STEAM that was kind of doing this. But now we have ITI who has CS for Good. They've got Level Up LA, which is where students go into a Minecraft world, which they love, Minecraft, right? Why not use that as a learning tool and an opportunity for students to design solutions to real world problems? So students are given this model of LA inside this, and they level it up. They make it more sustainable. They make LA more sustainable. They present it, and then there's a big celebration for this. And I hope many of you, participate in that. Your classes participate in that. All right, so we're going to watch this little video. It's about 3 minutes. And again, if you can't hear any sound, let me know.
We can be.
We must be the first generation
to end extreme poverty.
The generation
most determined
to fight injustice
and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done.
The global goals.
A 15-year plan
For everyone, everywhere.
with no one left behind.
We will live in a world
where nobody
anywhere
lives in extreme poverty.
Where no one
goes hungry.
where no one
Wakes in the morning asking if there will be food today.
We will live in a world where no child has to die of
Diseases we know how to cure.
And where proper health care
is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world where everyone goes to school.
And education gives us the knowledge
And skills
For a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities to thrive
and be powerful and safe.
We cannot succeed if half the world is impact.
We will live in a world
where all people can get clean water
And proper toilets
At home,
at school
and at work.
We will live in a world where
there's sustainable energy for everyone.
Heat, light.
And power for the whole planet.
Without destroying the planet.
We'll live in a world where economies prosper.
and new wealth.
lead to decent jobs
For everyone.
And we will live in a world
where our industry,
Our infrastructure and our
Best innovations
are not just used to make money, but to make all our lives better.
we will live in a world
where prejudices and extremes of inequality
Are defeated.
inside our countries,
and between different countries.
where people live in cities and communities
that are safe, progressive,
And support everyone who lives there.
where we replace
What we consume.
Planet where we put back.
What we take out of the earth.
We live in a world that is decisively rolling back threat to climate
change.
where we restore and protect the life in our oceans and seas. Or restore
and protect
life on land,
The forests.
animals, the earth itself.
with peace between and inside countries.
Where all governments are open.
And answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
And the justice rules.
with everyone equal before the law.
Where all countries and we their people.
Work together.
Partnerships of all kinds.
To make these goals a reality.
These are the United Nations global goals.
For sustainable development.
Let's get to work.
Okay, so just a little video, from people that I'm sure you all recognize, or at least most of them. And again, it's every time I watch that video, I still, it gives me hope, right? It makes me realize that, we are all in this together. So I said that we were going to go back to these photos. What I'd like you to do is take a few minutes to just take a look through these. And then you can, if you don't remember all the 17 goals, which even I'm still, trying to remember all of them, you can take a look at the links that I provided in the chat. And that last one will take you to a website for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. You can hover over the goals and it'll give you just a quick little bit of information. But it's also, you can get a lot more information about the goals from that site as well. So just take a look and, think about, just pick a goal or pick a photo. You pick a photo and then tell me, what goals you think might apply, right? There's no wrong answer. Just, you can type in the chat, A, and then you can think about like which UN goals that they might pertain to. And again, that link, the last link provides you a website that will kind of give you a brief explanation of all of them. All right, very good. Okay, so I'm going to show you kind of just my idea. So, this is again, there's no wrong answer. This is not the answer key. But this is, just by looking at these 5, photos, it looks like we could cover, all 17 goals from this, right? And yes, the board resolution is on climate change and climate literacy. But if you take a look at these goals carefully, so many of them can definitely fall under that umbrella, right? Okay. So this is kind of a quote that's been kind of guiding, again, the work that we do in climate literacy. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I may remember. Involve me and I learn. So again, this is that final part of the approach, learn, We want to shift it from, the focus being the teacher doing all the work and trying to transfer that knowledge, and students are like, could care less half the time, and it's just so difficult to get them to absorb it. But what we found and what research has found, and I'll be sharing a lot of this with you, is that when students are involved and not the object of our work, but that they're partners in this work, then something changes. And again, what I always thought was the peak of my ultimate goal was student engagement. It's not. There's something above that. It's empowerment. And it's empowering our students to recognize that they actually can make an impact in their community, in their families, in their school, and in the world, right? And when we do that, I think we truly do prepare them to be ready for the world, right? That world that unfortunately does have lots of problems. All right. And then this is my elementary grade. Yesterday was secondary, so I wasn't sure if everybody got it, but hopefully most of you will. If you know the book, if you give a mouse a cookie, if you give a student a real world problem, it might just change the world, right? We're not educating students, at least that's not how I see it. I see it as we are educating our future, right? Our society's future. All right, so I mentioned, now we're going to move on to Rigor. And I hope you've gotten this book, but if not, you should be getting it soon. I know that the books are at the school sites, and so make sure you take a look at it. But look for it. Talk to your principal if you haven't seen it yet. But Rigor by Design. So you can see in here, Rigor by Design, Not Chance by Karen Hess. You all will get a copy of this book, and on page 21, I just got a little snippet here. So what I'd like to do is if I can just have a volunteer, somebody in our group, if you could just unmute yourself and read this for us, I would very much appreciate it.
Cognitive rigor and engagement. 3 factors influence cognitive rigor, Hess et al. 2009. The first is cognitive engagement with the content, and that begins with emotional engagement when students make personal connections that answer such questions as, why do I want to learn this? Or how is this relevant to me? The second factor is the complexity of the content, concrete as opposed to abstract, literal as opposed to figurative, or practical as opposed to rhetorical. The third factor involves the scope of the learning activity, especially when students are called on to analyze or interpret multiple sources of evidence or develop a complex product of learning, such as a research paper, podcast, or multimedia presentation.
Thank you so much for reading that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so take a look and just kind of absorb it. Take a look at the highlighted phrases. So again, 3 factors influence cognitive rigor. The first is, cognitive engagement, right? Are they engaged? Can they answer the question, why do I want to learn this? How is this relevant to me? Because if that's not answered for them, then again, the engagement's not going to be there. The second factor being complexity of the content. Again, you can't be more complex than these global issues like climate change, right? And so because it's so complex and it's so open-ended, the number one, all students, regardless of what level they are, can access the problem. They can actually contribute to the solution in their own way at whatever level they'd like. And also, they can also do it in any way that they like. Again, that's where their talents and their skills and their things that, what they like comes in. Even coding or, Minecraft, even which our kids still love a little too much. Again, we can use that, right? And that could be a tool for the students to design solutions to real world problems. And then finally, the scope of learning activity, right? So again, we want students to be able to, again, look at the evidence, like multiple sources of the evidence. Ultimately, we want students to be able to research everything, and there's real world problems, especially if it's something that they care about and maybe they came up with. During a discussion, teachers could say, what bothers you around us, our neighborhood, in the world, or whatever it might be, and if we focus on that, it's something that they're already emotionally engaged in, right? And then podcasts and multimedia presentations, again, all these things can be different ways that students can contribute to these solutions. And then if I can have, actually, wait, sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay, so let's take a look at this math problem, right? This is exactly the kind of math problem when I first started teaching fourth grade. I had students asking me, and well, they hated long division. I think many teachers hated teaching long division. But again, they would look at this problem and they'd say, Mr. Song, why do I need to learn this? And my best answer as a new teacher was, because someday you're going to need it. And they were like, whatever, right? Now we can do a word problem, turn that into a word problem, right? And as you can see, it's about food waste, it's about landfills, composting. However, again, if it's just done in isolation and it's just a single word problem, they're not going to be engaged, right? It's not relevant to them. However, let's take a look at a couple of our schools and what they have. So if you look at Arminta Street Elementary School, which I had an opportunity to visit at the end of last school year, I was amazed because they have this composting system set up, and they've got something kind of very unique happening, that they're able to compost a huge amount of food waste. And so they've gotten it to the point where they're able to compost the entire school's cafeteria food waste. And if you notice that little white scale there, which I remember, as a kid going to the doctor's office and using that, the plant manager every day when he brings the food waste here, he would put his big bucket on the scale. He would weigh how much food waste is going into the composting system, and he would put it on a little clipboard. Imagine what the kind of math problems that our students could do with all this, the data analysis, and the data literacy that they would build from this. And students, can help to maintain this, and they can, there's so much science they can do from that little tiny space, right? History, social studies, there's so many different ways you can integrate, all the content areas into this. Technology, last year, our schools that had climate literacy champions received these kits, the climate action kits, and it had a little microbit, like a brain, the microprocessor, which students would code, and then it would connect to like a moisture sensor, and then students can actually, like, for example, if they had a plant in the class, they can put that moisture meter in the plant, and then the microbit would, analyze, receive the data from that sensor. And then if the water level went below a certain amount, it would activate a water pump, and the water would then pump water into that plant, right? How amazing is that? And students kind of start working with these little kind of models. They can start imagining bigger ways of applying things like that on a larger scale, right? And then we can see here, Sotomayor, one of my favorite schools to go to. I mean, the CTE agri-science area that they have, it's a farm. They've got 2 cows, they've got bunnies that kids can hold, they've got sheep, they've got hogs. And again, students are maintaining the compost bins, and they're building the hog pens with recycled pallets, and so again, connecting all the subject matter learning that happens normally would just happen in isolation in the classroom, in a setting like that. Imagine, again, the context is there, it's deep, and it's relevant to our students. And then Sylmar Charter High School, I got to know about this school because of the fact that they were hosting this event with LAUSD Food Services. And that has led to some amazing opportunities where, now I found out that in the past, if a farm wanted to work with LAUSD, they had to be able to be large enough to be able to provide the same exact kind of apple to every single one of our students, right? I mean, those are just massive corporate farms. They're not sustainable. They're not, regenerative in any way. And so, it kind of prevents any of the smaller local farms who are doing this sustainably and using regenerative agriculture practices. It kind of blocks them out. But now we've got a grant. LAUSD Food Services received a large grant to be able to start a farm to school program. And now our students are going to be able to get vegetables and fruits from local farms. Again, fresh fruits and vegetables, into the cafeteria. And in fact, the schools that have a climate literacy champion this year and next year, they will have an opportunity to receive these harvest boxes, these tasting boxes, which will have the fresh produce and vegetables from these farms. They will, they'll get curriculum to go along with that. There'll be videos where they will listen to the farmers talking about their regenerative practices and how, when they raise crops, it's not hurting the land. In fact, it's actually making it better, right? And so again, how real does it become for our students? And then we also want to be able to help them to value the food that they have more so that less of it goes into the trash can, right? And then LAUSD Food Services also got a grant to kind of compost the school waste, the food waste that's happening, at more schools, and hopefully at every school. Right. So imagine every school having these compost bins, where again, all this food waste, is going to go here, so that it can be turned into this beautiful compost that can, provide nutrients to the trees and the plants at the school site instead of going into the landfills. Right. All right. So, all right. Now, if we can have one more person just unmute yourself and read this little segment from page 23 of Rigor by Design, I'd much appreciate it.
My greatest aha moment about the depth of knowledge framework was the realization that we design with rigor and deeper learning in mind. DOK levels become a subtle but powerful force in shifting from teacher-directed to student-driven learning. This is the single most important use of depth of knowledge framework to guide the design of rigorous student-directed learning. At DOK 1 and DOK 2, teachers are directing learning, and students are receiving and recalling information and using near transfer, replicating what they were taught. At DOK 3 and DOK 4, teachers are strategically coaching learning and students are driving the direction of learning. In lesson planning, we need to think more about how to move students from acquiring and replicating foundational information to applying it in novel situations, far transfer, using complex DOK 3 and DOK 4 tasks.
Thank you so much. One thing I want you to think about as you kind of just look at this passage is this book has nothing to do with climate change. This has nothing to do with climate literacy, right? This is, it's depth of knowledge Karen has. I mean, this is all SBAC stuff, smarter balance, assessment, state testing stuff, right? So this is foundational educational, ideas and pedagogy, right? And research. And so this is all really, showing how important bringing in the world, in a sense, into our classrooms in a safe way is how important that is, and how important it is to teach things not in isolation, but in the greater context. Okay. All right. And so, again, and what I also love again is it's talking about how, the greatest use of, depth of knowledge framework is to guide design of rigorous student-directed learning, right? Student-directed learning. I used to tell my students, later on when I, had a little bit more experience as a teacher, I tell them, you know what? Well, especially when they told me, Mr. Song, you're making my brain hurt. I told them, at the end of the day, if you go home mentally exhausted, wonderful, you're learning, you're working your brain muscles. If I go home mentally exhausted, then I'm the one who's going to come back a little smarter, right? And so we want our students to go home, mentally exhausted because they're doing so much deep, rigorous work. All right. So if you take a look here, I'm not gonna read it to you. I'm gonna let you just take a look at it. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can read it a little bit better. But take a look at this. And again, especially take a look at DOK 3 and 4. So what are the teacher roles that are happening in order to promote higher, more rigorous learning in the classroom, right? And how does this connect to the real world problem-based transdisciplinary learning approach that we talked about? And you can see even here in level 3, students supports student designed performance tasks. And this is where, again, when the class comes together on a real world problem that really bothers them, that they would love to be able to contribute to the solution to, and then they kind of get into different groups, and each group comes up with a different project to go with that. And so then, that is a performance task. And you are giving them tasks that are standards based, that address the standards you want the students to get closer to mastery on. And you're assigning those based on the real world problem that our students so deeply care about. And when that happens and the students are the ones who are designing these projects and so forth, again, engagement won't be an issue. Now take a look at the student version. So take a look at this, what's happening with students at the higher DOK levels. Again, this is not a book about climate literacy, but in DOK 4, raises novel questions, investigates real world problems and issues, right? So again, climate literacy can actually raise the level of rigor in your classroom tremendously. And again, what's also been wonderful is I've heard from champions too who have been using this approach that two things happen. One is students are engaged, they're empowered, and they're excited to come to school. I've heard middle school students, in their climate action clubs that schools received funding for that had climate literacy champions. And, again, these action clubs during these times, students got to do this. And we had students, I'm not going to tell what school, but we had schools, a middle school, where the teacher was saying, other teachers were saying, I'm so sorry for bringing my student to you here, but again, and they are one of their, struggling students, right? That they've had behavior issues with. And then after the students had this approach and they started, taking on these real world problems and, and it was self-directed, these are the students who would come back to this teacher, the after school, club teacher, and say, is there any way I can help? Can I sweep the floor? Can I stay a little bit longer? So again, things change and happen when we kind of let go and let the students do the work, right? And then also, we get a lot of teachers who are also excited about all of this as well, because they're not just constantly micromanaging the learning, and instead they're facilitating the learning. Again, so we talked about this a little bit earlier, with that transdisciplinary approach. We also have disciplinary, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary approaches. They're all important. And there's a time and a place for all of them. In college, you're going to see a lot of disciplinary, right? And we're finding, and again, middle school and high school teachers who have courses and so forth, and the students are there only for a certain amount of time for one course. Multidisciplinary might be a really interesting approach. Okay, but again, in these approaches, what's common about these three is that the focus is still the subject matter. So ELA, math, science, history, social studies, whatever other subject, that arts, there's a ton of them that just didn't fit here. And so what we're doing in this kind of situation is we're tagging kind of these real world problems under the subject matter, right? However, in a transdisciplinary approach, instead of focusing on the subject matter, we focus on the real world context, and we tag the real world context with tags with tags and and tasks from all of these various subject matters, right? So students could be writing. Okay. And in their writing, they could also be, they can integrate data and math, right? History, social studies, climate literacy, with environmental justice and so forth. There's so much that could be integrated into this, right? So all of these little subject areas, even computer science, esports, culturally linguistic relevant, learning, SEL, UDL, all of these can be tagged onto these real world problems. And so, we are pretty much at the end right now. But here's the board resolution. I did give you the link to the entire slide deck. And so you can take a look at this. All of these are hyperlinked, so you can just take a look. You can click on it and it'll take you to the document, okay? And then if you look at the resource slide, all of these are also hyperlinked. If you want to learn more about the approach that I was talking about, you can click on each of these. And again, the Schoology group link is here, okay? And I said that I would share my contact information. You're more than welcome to, email me and ask any questions. If you're interested in climate literacy, being a climate literacy champion, please let me know. Thank you everyone for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and an even better new school year.